Alright, so we've got the side set up for World War II. Now let's go ahead and get into the actual kind of kickoff for it. So we talked about the Spanish Civil War being kind of a proxy war, almost like shadow boxing between the two major forces that are really going to be fighting this thing out. A Soviet Democratic kind of alliance versus a fascist alliance. So let's go to Germany right quick and take a look at the build-up to the war there. So 1933, Germany and Italy are going to withdraw from the League of Nations. It's kind of the first event that really starts to get people concerned about what's happening in both of those countries. And then in 1935, Hitler is going to start to rebuild the German military, focusing on the army in particular, and then also the Luftwaffe, which is the air force for Germany. It's going to be very feared in the beginning part of the war, especially with this invasion of Poland, and then when it starts to bomb Britain. So he's basically preparing, right? And he says that this is defensive, but he's essentially preparing for going into a war. And we don't know where that war is going to be or what his idea is, but that's essentially what's happening. And in 1935 as well, Italy is going to create their empire. Pretty much everywhere in the world has been imperialized. There's only one country in Africa that has not, and that's going to be Ethiopia. Ethiopia really has not gotten an extensive military. They are going to fight a last-ditch effort to try to keep the Italians out, to no avail. Switching back to Germany, a lot of Germany's expansion early on is going to be quite peaceful. Again, Germany with Hitler says that he only wants to unite all the German-speaking or the ethnic Germans of the world together in one country. And other people are saying, okay, well, if that's what he wants, why not allow him to do that? Then we only have to deal with one kind of German entity rather than Austria and other countries as well. Right? So that's going to be part of it. The other part is Lebensraum, living space. This idea that Germany needs to have some living space. It's caught between a hostile Soviet Union and a hostile France. And it wants to kind of push those out. And also, Germany is very dense cities. It's very industrialized. For that industry to continue, it needs an agricultural kind of frontier. I'm looking at you, Poland. That's really what Poland's place is here. Germany is going to look at it as basically a place to take over and be like our Midwest, a place where all the food is going to be grown and Germany's cities are going to hum along just fine. So with the Anschluss, basically what's happening here is Germany is going against that Treaty of Versailles. They occupy the Rhineland, which by the Treaty of Versailles they said that they would not put an army there. So France has got to fortify the Maginot Line in response. They have to protect themselves. We're seeing that militarism ramp up again, just like we saw in World War I. 1936, they've made it official. Italy and Germany are not just in a bromance, they are in a relationship now. They've got a pact, a binding resolution saying that they are together in foreign policy and that they're going to back each other up in times of war. 1938 is the kind of the big event. This is when Germany starts to go beyond its borders. It's going to join Germany and Austria together. Most people in Austria are ethnically German. So they put it to a vote. All right, do you agree with the reunification of Austria with the German Empire? And do you vote for the party of our leader Adolf Hitler? Ja or Nein? And even with this kind of ballot, it's very evident what you're supposed to do here. I mean, even take a look at the instructions. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to sign. Right? So now it's basically, well, okay, they just took over Austria. They've made that part of the German Reich. So then after they see that they could get Austria, then they start to take a look at some of the parts of Czechoslovakia which are German. This little crescent shape called the Sudetenland. Hitler says, yep, I want that, I'm taking it. They are ethnically German, they want to be part of the German Republic, you have no right to stop us. So the rest of the countries kind of get together and they're like, should we go ahead and fight Germany about this? They're expanding, they're being aggressive, and they agree for an appeasement policy, right? Basically, give the bully your lunch money so he doesn't beat you up. So in the Munich Agreement in 1938, Germany is going to be allowed to keep the Sudetenland. Hitler promises, pretty please, that he's not going to take over anything else. Most people see this kind of with two sides. One, they're very glad that there's not a war. But two, they don't really trust Hitler. They don't think that Chamberlain really has a deal that's going to preserve peace. So 1937, FDR is going to get on the radio like he does, and he's going to give a speech in which he talks about fascism being a disease that needs to be quarantined, and that we need to be prepared to be able to quarantine it. Maybe not through our direct intervention, but to help out in that intervention. So 1939 is when we really get scared. This is the big thing where we're like, oh no, what's about to happen here? We definitely don't like Nazis and fascists, especially those two together, but the Soviets sign a pact with Germany. Stalin is going to shake Hitler's hand. All right, and they're going to agree not to be aggressive towards each other. Now, even in the Soviet Union, people see this as a betrayal. The Nazis are the enemy. What are you doing, Stalin? But this was an idea of how to prevent a war between these two. The Nazis are going to sell the Soviets down later. So let's see the war begin. In 1939 is when this thing kicks off in Europe, and Poland is the first victim. Again, Lebensraum, Germany needs Poland as the agricultural region to fuel its industrialization. So September 1st, Germany is going to invade Western Poland. They're going to use blitzkrieg tactics, which is basically the Polish army is in their fields planting because nothing's supposed to happen, and all of a sudden dive bombers come screaming out of the sky, explosions everywhere, machine guns opening up, tanks rolling through your house, and it's basically the war starts all at one time. By 2 weeks into this invasion of Poland, this is a violation of that non-aggression pact. Poland was kind of seen as the buffer zone. As long as Poland stays neutral, right, Germany has nothing to fear from the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union has nothing to fear from Germany. But now that Germany has invaded, there's only one thing left to do, and that's the Soviet Union invades Eastern Poland. That way, when they have to fight, because they're pretty sure they're going to have to fight Germany now, they're fighting on other people's land for a little while. Right. And the Blitzkrieg, like we said, basically all these things attack you at once. The Luftwaffe comes screaming out of the skies with their Stuka dive bombers. The Stukas have a whistle on the front, screaming, shrieking sound that was supposed to provoke fear as they're diving down with their bombs, the tanks, and encircling tactics. So Poland is really just ripped apart. Now here's the thing about Poland. Yes, it has a lot of farmland, but the other thing is that there's a lot of Jewish people in Poland. So really the Holocaust doesn't really kick off full speed until Hitler invades Poland. Yes, there had been some ghettos established in Germany and in Austria, but this idea of clearing out the Jews doesn't really start in full effect until Poland's invaded. Most of your big extermination camps are in Poland. And again, Poland is split up between Russia and Germany. And that was a quick victory for Germany. Very easy. It kind of builds them up. They know that they can do this. But now they're in a war with France, since France has pledged to protect the neutrality or protect the independence of Poland. So very quickly in 1940, Germany pivots and attacks France. France has built up this Maginot Line on the border between Germany and France, and again, just like they did in the Schlieffen Plan in World War I, Germany just goes around it. They go through the neutral Dutch and Belgian areas, and very quickly France falls. There's also British troops there. They're having to get out as quickly as possible at Dunkirk. They're actually basically getting fishing boats to kind of get them all out before they're captured by the Nazis. Luckily they are, or else it would have been a whole lot worse for Britain. Alright, but France is now knocked out of the war. This leads to Hitler now basically having a secure foothold in Europe. He's got the Soviets on one side, Britain on the other, but he's pretty sure Britain's not going to be able to invade, and he can just sit there bombing them. Alright, and France basically splits apart. Philippe Pétain is going to be the leader of the Vichy France. And Charles de Gaulle is going to be the leader of Free France, but he's in exile. The Blitz, so after Germany has knocked out France, they're going to use French fields, airfields, as basically bombing missions against London. I need to find the website. I'll try to put the link in the description or either on the classroom account. But there is a website that has tracked all the craters from the London Blitz. And it's amazing. Basically 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 100 bombs in one city block throughout the Blitz. This is where we get really concerned. As Americans, we're concerned. Britain's our last hope. They've got to hold out. If they fall to this bombing, which we think is going to lead up to Operation Sea Lion, where the Germans are going to invade Britain, it's not going to be good for us. Germany is going to have all of the industrial capacity of Europe, and that Atlantic Ocean ain't going to save us. So we need to do everything we can to build up Britain. Up to this point, we've been giving Britain and France, and to a little bit of extent the Soviet Union, some weapons and supplies, but it's the Neutrality Acts. They have to come here, they have to pay cash, and they have to use their own boats. It's a slow and efficient system. Now, our neighbor, as FDR is going to put it, our neighbor's house is on fire. They're knocking on our door asking for a water hose. Are we to make them to pay for the water hose before they use it? No, we just want that fire out so it doesn't spread to our house. And after the fire is put out, what do we want? We want our water hose back. So we're going to start a Lend-Lease program. At the same time that the Blitz is going on, Germany makes a fatal mistake. They invade Russia in the winter. They get very close to Moscow. Right? They're going to encircle St. Petersburg and besiege it for over a year. They're ill-prepared for a Russian winter, and a lot of people are freezing. The supply lines are thin, and it's not really going well for the Nazis. At the same time, FDR is pretty much kicking butt on the radio. He's getting people revved up for a fight of a kind. Not to enter the war, but to really support the Allies openly. And he says we have to do this to protect the four freedoms. Freedom of speech and expression, freedom to worship as we want to, the freedom from want, the freedom from lack of resources, and freedom of fear. And then we get the Lend-Lease policy, which we're going to give, we're giving them supplies. Tanks, weapons, ammunition, ships, you name it, we're going to give it to you. We're going to be an arsenal of democracy is what he says we're going to be. Now this is the main battle tank for the United States during the war. The big thing here I want to make a point of, this is not the best tank of World War II. Not by far. This pretty much is a bargain basement tank. But here's the deal. We were able to make a lot of them. Basically, we were going to swamp Hitler and our machinery. The plan before we get into the war, we're going to make all this stuff, we're going to give it to Britain and the Soviets. They're going to deal with Hitler. And Hitler's not going to be able to deal with that because we have the best industrial capacity in the world. And he's just going to be swamped. Until Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor we'll talk about when we get to the Pacific side, but that changes everything. We've now got to go to war. So we are, in this thing now. So in the Eastern Front, this is dealing with the Soviets. So why are we talking about this in an American history class? This really is the pivotal part. Operation Barbarossa, that invasion from Germany into the Soviet Union, it keeps going. Down in here is going to be the important part. If Germany takes this area, right, they're going to be able to go into the oil fields, and they'll have all the gasoline they need to continue to wreck stuff everywhere. The Russians have to stop them down here. Right, so there's a little bit of a retreat, and then instead of trying to go after Moscow, the Germans really push towards those oil fields. Here at Stalingrad, right, this town was named for Joseph Stalin. Its name was changed to be his town. The Germans are going to get into the town. They're going to seize it, but then the Russians know that this is basically the do or die moment. They throw as many people as they can, some without weapons, and it works. They have to retreat from Stalingrad. They capture over 1 million German troops. And after Stalingrad, it's basically all retreat for the Germans. So the turning point battle of the war, a lot of people put it on D-Day, and it is a very important part of the war. But Stalingrad was earlier, and Stalingrad really turns the tide. There's some pictures from Stalingrad. Zhukov is going to be the Russian leader of the military, really known for the tank battles, the Battle of Kursk. He's kind of seen, we'll talk about Patton a little bit, he's seen as the Russian Patton. And everybody's running back to Berlin. Now, at the same time that that's going on, we're starting to move in on Germany as well, but we're really focusing on North Africa first. The Germans and the Italians had invaded North Africa, again, to get at oil, and we're trying to push them back. So this is the German commander Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox. This is Richard, I believe, I'm trying to remember, Richard Montgomery, or Hugh Montgomery. Field Marshal Montgomery. He's going to be the British commander. They're really doing the fighting at the beginning, and then we enter with George Patton. So this is an American supply plane flying over the pyramids, delivering supplies to the army there to push the Germans back out. So once we have North Africa seized, now we have to attack the soft underbelly of Europe. We see Europe as basically an armadillo or a hedgehog. Very spiny and protected up top, but Italy's there, and Italy could be the weak point. So we attack Italy. We invade, and we start to push up. Mussolini, the fascist leader, once we start invading, the people turn on him. He will be executed, hung upside down with his paramour upside down from telephone poles, so everybody can see that he's dead. Hitler then is going to lead kind of a quick invasion of the northern part of Italy just to make sure that there's a little bit more space between him and the Allied forces. There's utter destruction in a lot of places in Italy. The Battle of the Atlantic is also going on. There's going to be German ships right along the American coastline, and the submarines are going to be sinking a lot of our shipping. We are very concerned about that at the beginning part. So we start to convoy. We start to put our merchant ships in the middle and protect them with destroyers and other submarines to kind of screen them. And that is actually going to help to prevent all these losses. 1942, there's basically 3 ships a week being sunk off the North Carolina coast alone. That's a whole lot of sunken ships. But once we get those convoys, those numbers go down really, really quickly. And we start to build a whole lot of planes, and we send them to Britain. Britain is going to be our base. We have our bombers. We got bombers in Italy now. We're ready to start blowing stuff up in Germany. World War II is going to be a war that is fought on land but won in the air. There's something called air superiority. If we can rule the skies, we can bomb their tanks into oblivion. And that's pretty much what we do. We're going to fight on land. These big boys right here are going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And the fighter planes as well. These are dumb bombs. These aren't guided. Today we have bombs that we can laser focus and it explodes right where we want it to. These were just throwing them out of the back of a plane and hoping we hit the thing. So there's going to be a lot of civilian casualties from that. The other thing, though, is we are targeting cities. This is a total war. Everybody in Germany is involved in the war somehow, whether they are raising food for the army or whether they are in a plant making ball bearings. They are involved in the war effort, and we see them as legitimate targets, just like the Germans and the Japanese are going to see our civilians as legitimate targets as well. So we begin bombing cities, incendiary bombs, bombs that are meant to start fires and just create utter havoc and even more destruction than just the explosion. Probably the most well-known incident in this is Dresden, in which the entire town is essentially burned out. This is a picture after. You just see shells of buildings. So much destruction that Churchill, now remember that Churchill has survived the Blitz, in which the Germans were essentially doing the same thing to them. Right? That's the whole keep calm and carry on poster. That's in the middle of the subways while people are living down there because they can't go above ground for fear that the Germans are going to bomb them. So they got to keep calm and carry on as best they can. Churchill, after seeing reports of Dresden, wants us to knock it off. It feels like we're kicking a dead horse here and just making the war more painful. There's only one thing in Dresden we want to bomb. It's a factory that's making ball bearings. Ball bearings are used in almost anything that rolls. So that's why we're going after it. But even Churchill's saying this is too much. All right, so Western Front. The Western Front is mainly us invading from Britain. So this thing is basically showing, all right, if you were Germans, where were you going to expect an invasion? Essentially, most people are going to say here, right? At Calais. That's the French town, it's Calais. It's the thinnest area of the English Channel. And we want the Germans to think that too. So we're going to make a fake army over here. We're actually painting and blowing up balloon tanks, but we're going to hide another army over here. In the end, the invasion is actually going to happen in this little area right there. That's where we're going to invade with the D-Day invasions. There's 5 different beaches. Just by the luck of the draw, the Americans are going to get the worst beach, the most heavily defended beach. And even then, it's pretty lightly defended of what it could have been, mainly because we have faked them out. The commander for all Allied forces is going to be Dwight D. Eisenhower. And this is important. Remember that in World War I, we had our commander, Pershing, but he was subordinate to the British commander, British and actually French commander. Here, it's an American commander who's in charge of the whole operation. The British forces answer to, ultimately, to Eisenhower. Right? Eisenhower is running the show. He's the one deciding on the invasion, pumping the troops up, giving them the green light, and then once they're on the beaches, what do they do now? So June 6, 1944, the invasion opens up. The largest armada in human history is going to rush across the English Channel. A lot of people are confused by this picture. They see the blimps up there. There's nobody in these blimps. These are what are called aerostats. What they have is a big long metal wire, and they're supposed to protect these ships from bombing runs. To bomb ships, planes would have to dive down and through, and this would chop their wings off if they tried it. Also, they couldn't get a clear shot on the ships because of the aerostat. So that's why that's there. But it's showing a long line of these troop transports going to Germany. And this is what they're seeing. They get on smaller boats called Higgins boats. They go right up on the ocean, and all of a sudden it opens up. And if you're lucky and we're on 4 of the beaches, that door opens and you can just walk on the shore. But if you're at Omaha Beach, you were under fire the entire time. So Omaha is going to be much more problematic. Omaha and Juneau. The Canadians had Juneau, we had Omaha, we had Utah. The British had gold, and the British had sword. But however, this is what D-Day was all about. Not really the fighting on the day of. This is what we wanted to see. Right? This is D-Day +1. Right? D-Day, the day of the invasion. This is D-Day +1. The second day, the day after the invasion. What you see here are much larger ships offloading a whole lot of trucks, a whole lot of tanks, a whole lot of men, a whole lot of artillery, a whole lot of food, a whole lot of gas, a whole lot of everything. This is our beachhead now. This is where we can now take the fight to Germany. And that's why D-Day is so important. Right? So after D-Day, now it's closing in on Berlin from 2 sides. And we cross the Siegfried Line. So once we cross the Siegfried Line, we're into German territory. That's their defensive line. There's one last gap. Germany is running low on men and material. Most of the men that they have are too old or too young to really have been there in the beginning of the war. But they take their best troops and they're going to put them in a 30-mile front and try to break the American and British lines and try to not win the war, but sue for a peace in which maybe Hitler retains as the leader, or maybe there won't be war crimes tribunals. Maybe. I don't think that would actually hold up after they saw what happened, but that's the thinking here. So we're going to try to punch through. I call it the rubber band thesis. So if you have a rubber band, which I ironically don't have one right now, they're trying to punch a hole. They're trying to push as much force on that rubber band to make it snap. That rubber band being the British and American line. The problem is if you don't snap it and you hold your finger on that rubber band for hours and hours on end, what's going to happen to you? You're going to get really tired, your finger's going to hurt, and you're eventually going to have to let up. That's what's happened to the Germans at the Battle of the Bulge. This is in the middle of the winter, and it's a surprise attack. So the American soldiers are trotting through snow, and then all of a sudden, here comes this Panzer tank at them. But it doesn't break the lines, it only bulges it out, and then we're able to push further and further into German territory. And from the east, the Soviets have been making their long trek to Berlin. So we're basically deciding who gets the honor of flushing Hitler out. What we decide is that the Russians still are not involved in the Pacific War. They're still technically neutral there. We need to save men and material. So we're going to let the Russians deal with Berlin. And this is to the detriment of a lot of German citizens in Berlin. A lot of the civilians. They were looking for the British and for the Americans to save them from the Soviet hordes coming their way. Because they kind of figured what the German troops had done while they were in Russia, rape, pillaging, plundering, and they knew that was about to happen again in Berlin. And it did. It did. But VE Day, once the Soviets are able to put their flag on the Reichstag building, Hitler has committed suicide. The war is over in Europe. There's nothing left but to rebuild, which is going to take a long time. And Hitler commits suicide. A lot of people were concerned, thought that he did not commit suicide and that he lived out the rest of his days in Argentina. After the Cold War, we find physical evidence that the Soviets actually had his, at least remains, part of his DNA where they could prove that it actually was him that committed suicide in the Führer's bunker on that day. So the war's done in Europe. We'll pick up, that's been a little bit longer than I thought, we'll pick up with the Pacific Theater.